Think about how much power there is in finding things early, especially, when we're talking about our health. Today, we're plunging into a really interesting area of medicine, the global market for chromoendoscopy agents. We've got a recent report here that's shedding some light on where this market is actually heading.
Exactly. Chromoendoscopy agents, it sounds a bit technical, I know, but essentially these are special chemicals, dyes really, used during endoscopy procedures. They significantly enhance what doctors can see inside the gastrointestinal tract. And yeah, this report we've been looking at, it forecasts some really substantial growth in this field.
Substantial is definitely the word. This report, it anticipates the global market hitting, what, USD 400, 260 million in 2025. And get this, projecting a jump to nearly USD 6,900 million, 600 and 892.95 million to be exact, by 2033. That's a compound annual growth rate, a CAGR, of 6.20%.
hmm
Those numbers suggest a lot of momentum.
They really do. And the report we've delved into is it's quite comprehensive. It breaks down not just the current size, but also the anticipated growth rates, how things look regionally, and even how the market splits by product types, their uses, and who the end users actually are.
Okay. So our goal for this deep dive is to really unpack these key insights for you. We want to get a clear understanding of what chromoendoscopy agents are all about, and crucially, what's driving this significant expansion. All right, let's start with the basics then. In simple terms, what exactly are chromoendoscopy agents and how do they help?
Okay, so in essence, these are chemicals, like I said, often dyes, applied during an endoscopy. They dramatically improve the visibility of tissues and, importantly, any abnormalities within them.
Right.
See, during a standard endoscopy, a doctor uses a camera, right, to look inside your GI tract.
Right.
These chromoendoscopy agents, they act like visual aids. They make it much easier to spot things that might otherwise be missed, like polyps, inflammation, even early signs of cancer.
So it's almost like giving doctors a more detailed map, or maybe like highlighting the important bits on that map during these procedures.
That's a really good way to think about it, yeah.
Yeah.
While traditional endoscopy is valuable, absolutely, it can sometimes struggle, to detect very small lesions or subtle changes in the tissue. Chromoendoscopy, particularly with these agents, becomes incredibly important for boosting detection rates. And that ultimately can lead to much better outcomes for patients.
Okay.
What's also interesting is how these agents are increasingly being used alongside virtual chromoendoscopy techniques and high magnification imaging. That gives an even finer level of detail.
Right, layering the technologies. Now, what's fueling this significant market growth? The report points to a couple of really key factors, doesn't it?
Yes, spot on. Two main drivers really stand out. The first is the growing global emphasis on catching diseases early, in their early stages. There's a clear shift happening in healthcare, more toward being proactive, focusing on prevention.
Yeah.
I mean, the sooner a problem is identified, the greater the likelihood of successful treatment, right?
That makes complete sense. Finding something like colorectal cancer early on, for example, can just dramatically improve a person's chances.
Absolutely. Exactly. And chromodoscopy plays such a critical role in this early diagnosis for a whole range of GI conditions, with colorectal cancer being, a major focus. And this isn't just about the tech. There's also increasing awareness, among both patients and healthcare providers, but the real advantages of catching things early.
Okay, and what's the second major factor driving this growth then?
The second key driver is, well, unfortunately, it's the increasing prevalence of gastrointestinal disorders worldwide.
Uh-huh.
Things like lifestyle changes, dietary shifts.
Yeah.
They seem to be contributing to a rise in conditions like inflammatory bowel disease, IBD, and colon cancer.
It does seem like we hear about those conditions more frequently these days.
We do, sadly. And chromodoscopy is proving to be a very effective method for detecting what are called dysplastic lesions.
Dysplastic lesions.
Yeah, think of it like cells starting to behave irregularly. They're not quite cancerous yet, but they have the potential to become cancerous down the line.
I see. Early warning signs?
Precisely. Chromodoscopy helps us spot these early warning signs much more effectively. So basically, as these disorders become more common, the need for sophisticated diagnostic techniques like chromoendoscopy goes up, and that, in turn, drives the market for these enhancing agents.
Makes sense. Now, the report also touches on some challenges, some restraints on this market's growth. What are some of the hurdles here?
Yeah, there are a few. One significant restraint mentioned is the sometimes limited availability of these specialized agents.
Okay.
This can come from various things. For instance, disruptions in the supply chain for the raw materials needed. That can impact availability. Then there are regulatory processes. Getting new medical agents approved for use can be, well, it can be a long and pretty intricate process.
Right, the red tape.
Exactly. And of course, the capacity for production itself can sometimes be a bottleneck.
So even if the demand is high, if the agents just aren't readily available, that's going to naturally hold back growth.
Precisely. And the often lengthy approval timelines for new agents mean that, innovative solutions might take quite a while to actually reach patients. These delays, unfortunately, can affect patient care by limiting access to these procedures, potentially making accurate, timely diagnoses more difficult.
Okay, let's shift focus a bit, maybe look towards the future. What about key market trends? The report highlights expanding awareness and diagnostic accuracy first. Can you tell us more about that?
Certainly. There's definitely a growing recognition among healthcare professionals about just how critical it is to identify GI disorders right at the beginning in their earliest stages. As this understanding deepens, so does the demand for more precise diagnostic tools. And these chromoendoscopy agents, particularly absorptive agents and contrast agents, they play a vital role here. Well, they enhance the visibility of subtle abnormalities, in the mucosal lining. That allows doctors to detect precancerous lesions, inflammation, or even early-stage cancers that might just be invisible with standard methods.
So it's not just about seeing something, it's about having the clarity to really understand what you're seeing and its potential implications.
Exactly. That's the key. And this improved accuracy in detection, it directly translates to better treatment outcomes for patients. This positive impact is a huge reason for the increasing adoption of chromoendoscopy.
Right. And the second key trend mentioned is the ongoing technological advancements in endoscopy itself. How are these innovations influencing the market for the agents?
It's a really interesting synergy, actually. Innovations in the endoscopes themselves, things like high-definition imaging, HD, and narrowband imaging, or NBI.
NBI, right.
Yeah, they significantly enhance how effective chromoendoscopy can be. Narrowband imaging, for example, uses specific wavelengths of light. It enhances the visibility of blood vessels and mucosal patterns, so it works hand in hand with the chemical agents. It provides a much clearer, more detailed view of that lining.
So as the cameras get better, the tools for, let's say, highlighting the important details on that better picture also become more valuable.
Precisely. As healthcare providers increasingly adopt these advanced endoscopic technologies, they also look for compatible and effective chromoendoscopy agents to really maximize their ability to diagnose conditions accurately. So the growing use of these advanced technologies is directly driving the demand for these specialized chemical agents.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now let's take a look at the global picture. The report gives some really interesting insights into how this market breaks down regionally. North America seems to be the current leader, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. In 2025, North America had the largest share of the global market, accounted for over 40% of the revenue. The market size there was estimated at USD 1,576.20 million.
Wow.
And the report projects a steady CAGR of 5.0% for the region, looking out to 2033.
And what factors are contributing to North America's strong position? Is it just adoption rates?
It's several factors, really. There's a strong emphasis on advanced diagnostic technologies generally. Also, well-established health reimbursement systems that often cover these kinds of procedures.
Reimbursement helps.
Definitely. And just a high volume of endoscopy procedures being performed. Within North America, the U.S. is the largest market, estimated at USD 143.62 million in 2025, with a 4.8% projected CAGR. Then you have Canada at about USD 189 million, with a slightly higher CAGR, actually 5.8%, and Mexico around USD 143 million with a 5.5% CAGR.
Okay. And Europe also represents a pretty significant slice of the pie, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Europe accounted for over 30% of the global market share in 2025. That's a market size of about USD 1,235 million. Their projected CAGR is also right around 5.0% through 2033.
Similar to North America, then.
Very similar growth rate, yeah.
Yeah.
Key countries there include the UK, around USD 207 million market size, 5.8% CAGR, quite strong. France, a bit smaller at USD 113 million, 4.2% CAGR. And Germany, which has the largest European market at roughly USD 245 million and a 5.2% CAGR.
Now, what about the region that's expected to see the most rapid growth? If I remember correctly from the report, that's Asia Pacific.
You're exactly right. Asia Pacific, or APAC, it held around 23% of the global market share in 2025, so a smaller share than North America or Europe currently. That was about USD 122 million. However, the report forecasts the fastest CAGR for this region, a really robust 9.0% from 2025 to 2033.
Wow, 9%.
Yeah. This rapid growth in APAC, it signifies a potentially huge opportunity for companies in this space, obviously. But it also highlights, the increasing healthcare burden related to GI disorders in that region. That's something policymakers and healthcare providers will really need to address proactively.
That's a really significant growth rate. What's driving such rapid expansion there?
Well, a couple of key things seem to be contributing. One is the rapidly aging population in many APAC countries. Aging often correlates with an increase in the prevalence of GI disorders.
Okay.
Simultaneously, you're seeing significant advancements happening in healthcare technology and infrastructure across the region. So that results in greater adoption of advanced diagnostic procedures, like chromoendoscopy.
Right, catching up and maybe even leapfrogging in some areas.
Could be. Notably, China is a major player. Market size there, USD 129 million, 8.5% CAGR predicted.
Oh.
And India is showing really strong growth, too. About USD 102 million market size, but a projected CAGR of 10.9%.
Over 10%.
Yeah, very high growth potential there. What ground level changes do you think are contributing most significantly to that kind of rapid expansion in those specific regions?
That's a great question. It really makes you wonder about the specific investments and healthcare initiatives taking place there, doesn't it? Increased screening programs, perhaps? Public awareness campaigns?
Could be all of the above.
What about the other regions mentioned, South America, the Middle East, and Africa? How do they fit in?
Right. So South America held over 5% of the market share in 2025. Size around USD 162 million, projected CAGR of 6.5%. Brazil is the key market there, about USD 69 million, and a strong 7.1% CAGR.
Okay.
The Middle East accounted for around 2% of the market in 2025 at USD 170 million, expected to grow at about 6.7% CAGR. Saudi Arabia and the UAE showing notable growth there, around 7% or slightly higher. And finally, Africa.
Yep.
Currently holds around 1% of the market. Market size about USD 94 million in 2025, projected CAGR of 5.9%. South Africa is a significant contributor there. It's interesting to see how these growth rates might reflect the evolving healthcare priorities and infrastructure developments in these different parts of the world.
It really is fascinating. Seeing those variations is quite telling. Okay, now let's delve into how the market is segmented. The report breaks it down by product type, application, and end user. Starting with product type, what are the main categories?
Okay, so the market's primarily segmented into absorptive agents, contrast agents, and reactive agents, though the report focuses mostly on absorptive and contrast. It indicates that absorptive agents are likely the dominant category right now. These include substances like indigo carmine, acetic acid.
Right.
They work by being absorbed by the mucosal surfaces, and that enhances the contrast between normal and abnormal tissue. Really critical for detecting those early lesions we talked about.
And what about the other types? You mentioned contrast agents.
Yes, contrast agents. These include things like iodine-based solutions, methylene blue. The report highlights this segment as having the fastest growth rate.
Ah.
These agents work slightly differently, further enhancing the visibility of tissues. They're particularly useful, it seems, in diagnosing lesions, inflammation, and maybe more defined malignant growths.
Interesting. Okay, let's move on to application. Where are these agents most commonly used within the GI tract?
Currently, the esophageal application segment holds the largest share of the market.
The esophagus, okay.
Yeah, which is understandable given the focus on early detection of Barrett's esophagus, precancerous lesions, and tumors there, especially with the increasing prevalence of disorders like GERD leading to esophageal issues.
Makes sense.
However, the colorectal application segment is expanding rapidly. This is driven by the increasing use of chromoendoscopy for diagnosing polyps and, of course, early-stage colorectal cancer during colonoscopies. It really highlights the growing importance of early detection across different parts of the GI tract, not just the esophagus.
Right, right. And finally, segmentation based on who the end users are. Where are these procedures happening?
Well, hospitals currently represent the largest share of the market.
Yeah.
That kind of makes sense, right? They're the primary centers for a wide range of endoscopic procedures, often more complex ones.
Sure.
However, ambulatory surgery centers, or ASCs, are identified as a rapidly growing segment.
ASCs, okay.
They offer more cost-effective, often more convenient settings for outpatient procedures, including many endoscopies that utilize these chromoendoscopy agents. This trend likely reflects the broader shift we're seeing in healthcare towards more accessible and efficient outpatient care delivery.
Yeah, that tracks with other trends we've seen. This paints a really clear picture of where the demand is coming from and maybe where we can expect more expansion. The report also touches on the competitive landscape. Sounds like a fairly dynamic market.
It is indeed. Highly competitive, actually. It's a mix of, well-established global players and some smaller, maybe more regional companies. The report mentions key names like Cosmo Pharmaceuticals, NV,
Hmm.
Merck KGaA, Thermo Fisher Scientific, among others.
Okay.
These companies are really focusing on strengthening their product portfolios, expanding their reach through distribution networks, and, importantly, investing in innovation in this space.
Are there any specific examples of recent activity things companies are doing?
Yes, the report notes a couple. GE Healthcare launched Omnipack, which is an iohexyl-based contrast agent, back in November 2021. Now, that's designed to improve visualization during various imaging procedures, including potentially those involving the digestive system.
Right.
And also, in July 2023, Merck made a significant investment in expanding its manufacturing of cell culture media in the U.S. While not directly an agent, it indicates a broader commitment to the pharmaceutical and life sciences sector, which, indirectly supports the development and production of these kinds of agents down the line.
I see. Infrastructure investment.
Exactly. These examples just illustrate the ongoing activity and investment happening in and around this area.
Okay, so to sort of recap our deep dive here, it seems the global chromoendoscopy agents market is really on a significant growth path, fueled by, well, two main things. That increasing emphasis on early disease detection, which is great, and unfortunately, the rising incidence of gastrointestinal disorders.
Mm,
While the availability of agents presents some hurdles, the overall trends point towards, greater awareness, exciting tech advancements in endoscopy itself that are boosting demand.
yeah,
Asia Pacific is definitely the region to watch for the fastest growth. And while absorptive agents currently lead, contrast agents are coming up fast.
right.
Esophageal applications have the biggest share now, and hospitals are the main end users, but those ambulatory surgery centers are becoming increasingly important.
That's a comprehensive and, yeah, very accurate summary. It's pretty evident that these chromoendoscopy agents are playing an increasingly crucial role in the early and accurate diagnosis of a whole range of GI diseases.
So here's maybe a final thought for you, our listeners, to consider. How will these continuous advancements, both in the agents themselves and in the endoscopic technologies they work with, how will that continue to shape the way we approach early diagnosis of diseases in the GI tract in the coming years? What implications might this have for preventative healthcare strategies on a broader scale?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Also, it's worth reflecting on those significant regional differences in growth rates we talked about. What specific underlying factors in those markets are really driving those changes? Maybe further exploration into specific agents or companies could yield even more interesting insights for you. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.